She and her dog were homeless. Then they won an abandoned farm, hiding a life-changing secret. The Montana winter came down like a sentence. Snow fell sideways, driven by a wind so sharp it felt carved from broken glass. Beneath the old steel bridge outside Livingston, Mira Dawson curled into herself, arms wrapped around her chest as if she could hold in the last scraps of warmth. Rusty pressed against her hip, his thick German shepherd coat dusted white, his breath rising in small clouds. The dog kept his eyes on the darkness, ears twitching at every echo from the frozen riverbed below. Mira was 33, but nights like this made her feel twice that. Hunger hollowed her. Cold numbed her fingers until they no longer felt like part of her hands. She had grown used to being invisible. People drove past without seeing her. Others saw her and flinched away. The bridge had become a kind of shelter, a place where the world's noise softened and only the wind spoke. Rusty nudged her ribs with his nose. He sensed things before she did. Shifting weather, approaching footsteps, danger, hope. Tonight he sensed something else. Agitation, a restless energy running beneath his fur. "Easy, boy," she whispered, though her lips barely moved. "We just have to make it till morning." But morning was a luxury. The cold was creeping in too fast. Her vision blurred around the edges, turning the world dim. She tried to flex her fingers. They didn't respond. The numbness was spreading up her arms like frost climbing a window. Rusty whined, low and urgent. Then he barked once, sharp, cutting through the storm like a crack in the ice. "Rusty, not now, please." But he wouldn't stop staring across the snowfield, toward the town Mira had been pushed out of 3 times already. His ears stood tall, his body stiffened. A sound broke through the wind. A metallic ping. Then her cheap phone buzzed inside her coat pocket, faint like a trapped insect. She almost laughed. The battery hadn't held a charge for more than an hour in months. How was it still alive now, in the coldest night of the year? Her hands trembled as she fumbled the phone out. The screen lit her face with a pale blue glow. A notification blinked. "Congratulations, Mira Dawson. You have won the Red Hollow Community Raffle." She blinked. Her first thought, scam. Her second, someone's cruel joke. She almost shut the screen off, but the next line froze her breath. Prize, full deed transfer to Red Hollow Farm. She read it twice. A third time. A farm? A whole farm? The same raffle she'd bought a $5 ticket for 2 months ago at the gas station. She'd bought it because the cashier offered her a pity coupon for tea, and she didn't want to look like she needed pity. She had almost thrown the ticket away. Rusty barked again, louder this time, pressing his paws against her knees as if urging her to stand. "It's not real," she murmured. "It can't be." But the notification wasn't going away. It pulsed on her screen like a heartbeat. And underneath her shock, something else stirred. A memory. The flyer had mentioned the farm had been abandoned for decades. Too remote for most people. Too damaged for the county to sell. So they raffled it off instead, a publicity stunt nobody took seriously. Nobody except her. Rusty pawed at her coat again, impatient. His breath steamed in the freezing air, and his eyes locked on hers in a way that made her chest tighten. He wasn't just excited, he was focused, intent, as if he understood what the message meant, as if he knew this was their one way out. The wind gusted hard, rocking the bridge above them. Snow spilled down in sheets. Mira pushed herself upright, legs shaky, head light from cold. Rusty nudged his body under her hand, steadying her with quiet strength. "All right," she whispered. "Let's check it out, just in case." The moment she said it, another gust slammed into the bridge. Ice cracked. A chunk of frozen metal dropped dangerously close to where she'd been lying. Rusty leaped between her and the falling debris, barking like he could hold the storm back with sound alone. She stared at the broken piece of steel. If they had stayed there 5 seconds longer— She didn't finish the thought. She tightened her grip on Rusty's collar. He leaned into her, guiding her forward through the blizzard, one determined step at a time. The snow swallowed their footprints as quickly as they made them, erasing any trace of where they had been. Behind them, the wind howled like the world closing in. Ahead of them lay miles of dark road, and somewhere in the heart of Red Hollow Valley, an abandoned farm waited for a woman who had nothing left, and a dog who refused to give up on her. In the middle of the storm, with her phone's dying battery flickering at 20%, Mira whispered into the cold, "Maybe this is the chance we were supposed to take." Rusty gave a single, steady bark, the kind that didn't ask, the kind that answered, the kind that sounded like survival. The road into Red Hollow Valley wound through fields of brittle grass and frozen earth. Morning light barely touched the landscape, turning everything pale and washed out. Mira walked with her backpack slung over one shoulder, Rusty trotting beside her with purposeful strides. His breath puffed in white clouds. Her fingers stung from the cold, but warmth flickered inside her chest with every mile they covered. A farm. A real place. Maybe a new beginning. Red Hollow Farm appeared slowly through the mist. First the outline of a collapsed barn, then the silhouette of a windmill that no longer turned, then the main house. It stood at the center of the property like an exhausted survivor. Boards warped, roof sagging, windows clouded with age. The fence around the yard leaned as though it too had given up long ago. Mira stopped at the rusted gate. Rusty sniffed the air and let out a low hum in his throat. Not a growl, not fear, something closer to alert curiosity. "This is really it," she murmured, half to herself, half to him. She pushed the gate open. It screeched in protest. The yard was still except for the wind threading through dead weeds. The old house creaked as if waking from a long sleep. Mira's boots crunched over gravel as she made her way towards the porch. Rusty stayed close, circling once, twice, tail stiff, ears pricked. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old wood. Light filtered through cracks in the shutters, slicing the room into pale stripes. Cobwebs swayed near the ceiling. A single chair lay on its side beside a stone fireplace filled with ash that looked decades old. Mira took a slow breath. She had slept in shelters, alleys, bus stations, but stepping into this place felt different. It felt claimed but abandoned, open but not welcoming, like a house holding its breath. Rusty padded ahead of her, nose low. His nails clicked softly on the warped floorboards. He paused at the threshold of the kitchen. Mira followed, brushing past the faded wallpaper peeling in strips. The kitchen looked untouched for years. Cabinet doors hung crooked. The sink was stained with rust. Dust coated everything, softening the sharp lines of abandonment. But Rusty stood frozen in the middle of the room, tail raised stiff, head turned slightly. "What is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer, of course, but his body spoke for him. He lowered his snout to the floorboards and inhaled long and deep. A second breath followed, then a third. His posture changed. Muscles coiled tight. He scratched once at the wooden planks, then looked up at Mira with an intensity she recognized instantly. There was something here. She knelt beside him, pressing her palm to the cold floor. Nothing stood out at first, just old boards, rough with age. But Rusty insisted, nudging her hand aside and scraping again. His paw caught a groove in the wood. A faint metallic clink answered. Mira leaned closer. She brushed away the dust. A metal ring glinted faintly. A hatch handle, embedded flush with the kitchen floor, almost invisible beneath grime and time. Her heartbeat quickened. She curled her fingers around the ring and tugged. It didn't move. She tried again, harder. The hatch gave a fraction of an inch, then stopped, jammed by something beneath. She exhaled, sitting back. The edges of the hatch were sealed with old screws, their heads rusted into the wood. "Someone didn't want this opened," she whispered. Rusty let out a short bark, sharp and decisive. Not fear, not warning, urging. Mira studied him. His eyes were bright, alert, locked on the hatch. Whatever lay below, Rusty was certain of its importance. The dog had always been good at sensing things people missed. That instinct had saved lives in his rescue days. He had dragged survivors from rubble, guided responders through smoke too thick for human eyes. That same instinct now aimed at the hidden door. A sudden noise broke the stillness outside, a distant engine, then tires crunching gravel. Mira stood quickly and moved to the window. A pickup truck pulled into the drive. Mud splattered. Old. The kind people here had driven for generations. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered with a sheriff's badge glinting at his coat. His face carried years of weather and suspicion. He scanned the property like someone checking if their secrets had stayed buried. Mira stiffened. Rusty growled low at her feet. The man knocked once on the doorframe, not waiting for an answer before pushing it open. Mira Dawson. She nodded. "I'm Sheriff Briggs. Just heard the new owner arrived. Thought I'd stop by." His smile was thin and strained, his eyes too quick as they darted around the room, taking stock of everything, lingering a moment too long on the kitchen floor. "I imagine you won't find much here," he continued. "Farm's been empty for over 40 years. Best not to wander around too much. Some parts aren't safe." Mira forced a nod. Rusty moved subtly between her and the sheriff, head lowered, teeth half exposed. Briggs eyed him but kept talking. "If you're planning to stay, make sure you don't go poking places that don't need poking. Old land like this carries old trouble." He said it casually, but the threat lay underneath like a blade under cloth. When he left, the silence pressed in even harder than before. Mira stood motionless for a long moment, listening to his truck fade down the dirt road. Rusty nudged her knee again, then sat beside the hatch. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll take it slow, but you're right. There's something down there." She pressed her hand to Rusty's head. His gaze never left the hidden door. Outside, the wind swept across the abandoned farm, carrying with it the faintest whisper of a past that refused to stay buried. Inside, a woman and her dog stood over a hatch no one had opened in decades, and Rusty's instincts, sharp as ever, told him this was only the beginning. Night settled over Red Hollow like a heavy coat. The farmhouse creaked under the weight of the wind. Mira crouched in the kitchen again, Rusty at her side, both lit only by the narrow beam of her flashlight. She had spent the afternoon clearing dust and debris off the hatch, scraping away decades of grime until the metal ring shone faintly. Now she pulled it open a few inches. Cold air rushed up, smelling of earth and something older, something untouched. The flashlight beam disappeared into the dark, like it had been swallowed. Mira leaned closer, angling the light into the void. Only blackness stared back. Rough dirt walls, wooden supports, no stairs, just a drop into a deeper tunnel. Rusty stood rigid beside her, hackles raised, breath quick and sharp. His body blocked her from leaning too far over the edge. Every instinct in him screamed caution. "It's okay, boy," she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "I'm not going down there, not yet." Rusty growled low, a warning rumble from somewhere deep in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was protectiveness, alertness. The same sound he made in the old rescue unit when he sensed unstable structures or trapped survivors. Mira stayed still, listening. The house around them was silent, but the air from the hatch felt wrong, heavy, like secrets lived in that darkness. She closed the hatch gently, and Rusty relaxed half an inch. Only half. Trying to steady herself, Mira stepped into the living room. Earlier she had found a stack of old boxes, untouched and swollen with age. She dragged the nearest one toward the dim window, dust rising like powder in the air. Rusty sniffed at the cardboard, tail stiff. Inside were letters, old receipts, a chipped coffee mug with the name Callahan etched into the ceramic. Beneath those, wrapped in a flannel shirt, lay a leather-bound journal, its spine cracked but intact. Mira opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky in some places, firm in others. She read the first line and froze. If anyone ever finds this, know that the truth lies beneath the ground. Her breath caught, pages filled with half-written thoughts, frantic notes, warnings, phrases repeated over and over. Don't let them seal it. Don't trust the sheriff. It wasn't an accident. Mira read until the words blurred. Rusty's bark shattered the silence. He sprinted to the front door, shoulders low, posture ready. Mira snapped the journal shut and rushed after him. A moment later, headlights washed across the windows. Gravel crunched. Another vehicle had pulled into the yard. Her stomach tightened. Sheriff Harlan Briggs appeared at the front door without knocking. Same heavy boots, same cold gaze. His breath steamed in the air as he stepped inside like he owned the place. Even before he spoke, Rusty growled, louder this time. "Evening," Briggs said. "Lights are on. Thought I'd check in. Everything all right here?" His eyes traveled around the room, too deliberate to be casual. They landed on the dust disturbed in the kitchen, then drifted to the box at her feet. The journal tucked under her arm. Mira straightened. "Just cleaning." Briggs nodded, but something tightened in his jaw. "Old houses can be dangerous. You shouldn't poke around too much. Floors are soft, foundations cracked. You might fall through." Rusty stepped in front of Mira, his body a taut barrier. His eyes never left the sheriff. Briggs forced a smile. "That dog of yours thinks he's the sheriff now. He just senses things." Mira said, "He always has." "Dogs sense trouble," Briggs murmured, "especially when it's near." He walked toward the kitchen. Too fast, too familiar. Rusty barked once, sharp, stopping him. Briggs lifted his hands. "Easy, I'm just making sure you're safe." But his eyes had already darted to the floorboards where the hatch lay hidden. Mira felt a pulse of fear. Had he known about the hatch before she arrived? Had he been waiting for someone to reopen it? Briggs cleared his throat. "If you find anything odd in this place, you let me know. Property this old comes with history. Not all of it pleasant." Mira met his gaze. "Like what?" He didn't answer right away. He studied her, weighing something. Then he said quietly, "Sometimes folks here don't let go of the past. Sometimes they bury it, thinking it'll stay down there forever." Rusty growled again, as if he understood each layered meaning. Briggs nodded to himself, turned and left without another word. His truck vanished down the road, its taillights bleeding into the dark. Mira locked the door behind him and exhaled shakily. Rusty pressed his head against her hand. His body trembled with the tension she felt in her own bones. "We're not safe here," she whispered. "Not the way I hoped." Rusty trotted back towards the kitchen hatch and sat beside it, staring at the floor as if he could see through it. "You think the answer is down there, don't you?" He didn't move, didn't blink. His silence spoke louder than words. Mira placed the journal on the table and opened it again. The final written line caught her eye. "If the sheriff ever finds this, it means I didn't make it out. But the truth remains under our feet." A shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. She touched Rusty's fur. "We need to know what happened here, but we're not doing it alone." Rusty rested his muzzle on the hatch, a guardian standing watch over whatever waited in the darkness below. And for the first time since she arrived, Mira knew that whatever secret had been buried under Red Hollow Farm was already waking up. The night deepened around Red Hollow Farm, swallowing the last traces of daylight behind the jagged ridges of the valley. The house groaned as temperatures dropped. Mira sat on the living room floor with Rusty at her side, the journal open in front of her like a wound she wasn't sure she should touch. But her thoughts drifted somewhere far older than the pages. Her past had always returned in the quiet moments. She remembered the day her adoptive mother left the house without saying goodbye. She remembered the social worker's tight smile, the shuffled paperwork, the empty room afterward. She remembered clinging to small things she thought would save her: scholarships, a job at the clinic, a cheap apartment. Each one slipped through her fingers: a late rent notice, a layoff, a medical bill she couldn't pay. Eventually all roads led her here: a bridge, a blizzard, and a raffle ticket she bought to feel like she still existed. Rusty nudged her arm, sensing her drift into old pain. He always knew when to pull her back. She touched his scarred flank. A long line ran beneath his fur, the remnant of the SAR mission that ended his service. He had gone into the collapsed mine 3 times, dragging children out of the rubble while above ground his handlers screamed for him to stop. On the 4th trip, the ceiling fell, and steel beams crushed the right side of his body. They called him a miracle for surviving. Rusty never cared for the praise. The only thing he cared about were the 3 children whose scent he had followed in the dark. Now he followed hers. Mira wiped her eyes, closed the journal, and tried to breathe in a way that didn't hurt. Rusty stiffened. His head snapped up, ears pointed toward the back of the house. Mira froze. She knew that posture. She had seen it when trucks backfired near shelters, when drunk strangers passed too close to her belongings, when danger crept in with footsteps too soft to hear. Rusty growled low. "What is it?" Mira whispered. He didn't look at her. He bolted for the back door. Mira scrambled up. Rusty barked sharply, demanding she follow. She grabbed her coat, shoved her feet into boots, and hurried into the freezing night. Rusty was already halfway across the field behind the farmhouse, moving fast, glancing back every few seconds to make sure she kept up. His breath steamed in the half-moon glow as he cut through the tall dead grass, then darted towards the tree line bordering the property. Mira's pulse hammered. The cold bit into her chest, but adrenaline pulled her forward. Rusty reached the pines and stopped, not from confusion but from certainty. He planted himself at the base of an old spruce, its trunk twisted by time. Mira caught up, panting, her breath turning the air white. She followed Rusty's gaze downward. The ground had been disturbed. Not recently, but not naturally either. Piles of soil shifted, stones arranged neatly along an edge. A faint depression ran from the tree into the forest like a scar. Rusty pushed his nose into a patch of moss. His body trembled with recognition. Not fear, not warning. Recognition. Mira pulled aside the moss, her hands shaking. Beneath it lay wooden boards, old and dirt-stained. She scraped away more moss. The boards formed a narrow entryway, carved into the earth and reinforced by beams. A tunnel, hand-dug, hidden for decades. Her breath caught. She glanced at Rusty. He stared at her, waiting, urging. "Someone lived here," she whispered. "For a long time." Rusty barked once. The sound echoed through the trees. Mira lifted one of the boards. It groaned under her touch. Cold air seeped out, carrying a smell so faint it almost wasn't there. Smoke. Soap. Something human. She froze. This wasn't just a forgotten tunnel. It had been used. Not recently, but long after the farm was abandoned. "Rusty," she said, barely breathing. "Someone survived." Rusty stepped closer, lowering his head into the opening, sniffing deeply. His whole body leaned forward as if drawn by something inside. Mira's heart pounded hard enough to hurt. She grabbed her flashlight and pointed it into the tunnel. The beam disappeared into twisting earth-lined walls. The tunnel sloped downward, disappearing into darkness that felt alive. Rusty took one step into the hole. "No." Mira grabbed his collar. "Not yet. We don't know how stable it is." Rusty didn't pull away, but he didn't back up either. His eyes remained fixed on the darkness. A twig snapped behind them. Mira spun around, flashlight sweeping across the trees. Nothing moved, but the dread settled in her bones. Someone could have been watching them, someone who didn't want them anywhere near this place. She put her hand on Rusty's neck. His muscles were tight, alert, ready. "We go back for now," she whispered. "We come back prepared." Rusty gave one last lingering stare into the tunnel, then stepped back, staying pressed against her leg as they returned toward the farmhouse. The night closed around them again, colder than before. Behind them, deep in the forest, the air shifted inside the hidden tunnel. Dust drifted. Something stirred. Not wind. Something else. Someone. The next morning came grey and heavy, as if the valley itself wanted Mira to turn back. Frost coated the ground in a thin silver sheet, cracking softly under her boots as she and Rusty crossed the yard toward the hatch. She carried a rope, gloves, 2 flashlights, and a backpack with whatever food she had left. Rusty walked at her heel, silent and alert, every step precise. The night before had changed him. It had changed her too. They opened the hatch. Cold air rose again from the darkness, carrying the same unsettling mix of earth, age, and something almost human. Mira tied the rope to an exposed beam, looped it around her waist, and took a long breath before lowering herself into the hole. Rusty jumped down beside her, landing lightly on the packed dirt floor. The tunnel stretched ahead, narrower than she remembered from the night before. Rusty took the lead, his nose close to the ground. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. No wind, no birds, only the soft rhythm of Rusty's paws on soil and Mira's footsteps echoing behind him. They turned a corner, and the beam of Mira's flashlight fell on a wooden door. It hung crooked from a rusted hinge, the bottom half eaten by moisture and time. Rusty sniffed along the edges, then looked back at her, urging her forward. Mira pushed it open. A small underground chamber unfolded before them. Crude, but lived in. The air was stale, but not dead. It smelled faintly of smoke, dried herbs, and something floral that reminded her of old blankets. She lifted the flashlight higher. Shelves carved into the dirt walls held jars of dried food. A rusted kettle sat on top of a small fire pit lined with stones. A pile of pots lay in a corner beside hand-forged tools. There was even a hanging rack with threadbare shirts and skirts. Women's clothing, faded to the color of dust. A bed of hay rested near the far wall, flattened from decades of use. An old pair of boots stood neatly beside it. Mira's breath caught. This wasn't a shelter for emergencies. Someone had lived here. For years. Rusty walked slowly around the chamber, sniffing everything with a seriousness she had only seen in him during rescue work. He paused at the bed, ears forward, head low. Mira joined him and pressed her hand to the hay. It crumbled under her touch. She whispered, half to herself, half to the walls. "You weren't hiding from the weather. You were hiding from people." Her flashlight beam brushed something tucked under a metal bowl. A rectangle. A paper corner. She reached for it, hand shaking. It was a folded letter, yellowed and brittle. The ink had bled in places, but most of the writing remained clear. She opened it. If I never return, then the truth about the Callahan family will die with me. Do not trust the sheriff. Do not trust the town. What they buried here was never meant to stay hidden. They will come for anyone who digs too deep. Mira's pulse thudded in her ears. The Callahans. The same name etched on the old coffee mug. The same name scribbled inside the journal upstairs. Rusty's growl tore through the silence. He pivoted toward the tunnel entrance, body tense, teeth bared. His whole frame vibrated with warning. Mira's flashlight shook as she pointed it toward the way they had come. Footsteps scratched against dirt. Light but unmistakable. Someone was above them. Someone who had followed. Mira's chest tightened. She slid the letter into her jacket and moved toward Rusty, who was already positioning himself between her and the tunnel mouth. The growl in his throat deepened, rolling like thunder trapped underground. A shadow crossed the faint circle of daylight near the entrance. Mira froze. Rusty's bark exploded through the chamber, fierce, protective, unmistakable. The shadow darted back. For a moment all was still. Then the sound of quick footsteps scuffed across the dirt above, retreating towards the woods. Rusty stayed locked in place, staring at the tunnel until the last trace of danger faded. Mira finally exhaled, knees weak. Someone had followed them. Someone who didn't want her reading that letter. Someone who believed the secret buried below the farm was still worth silence. Or blood. She knelt beside Rusty, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You saved us again," she whispered. Rusty didn't relax. His ears stayed perked, listening to the faint echoes above. Mira lifted her flashlight, scanning the chamber one more time. This wasn't just a survival bunker. It was a refuge, a prison, a witness. And somewhere in these walls, the truth waited. Something the sheriff feared, something the town had chosen to forget, and something the Callahan family had died trying to expose. Mira tightened her grip on Rusty's fur. "We're not running," she whispered. "Not anymore." Rusty nudged her then, a soft but steady push. He was ready for whatever came next, and the darkness around them felt like it, was listening. The wind howled across Red Hollow that night, rattling the loose boards of the abandoned barn behind the farmhouse. Mira had come out searching for wire cutters she thought she'd seen earlier. Rusty stayed close, his movements rigid, as if the shadows themselves made him uneasy. Inside the barn, the air was still. Dust swirled in the slices of moonlight slipping through broken slats. Mira knelt beside an old crate, brushing away cobwebs. She reached in. A thud sounded behind her. She turned too late. A figure lunged from the dark, knocking her backward into the hay-strewn dirt. Pain burst across her shoulder. Mira gasped, scrambling to push him away, but a rough hand pinned her down. Rusty's snarl tore through the barn. The man had no time to react before Rusty slammed into him with full force, teeth flashing. The stranger rolled to the side, grabbing an old pitchfork, swinging wildly. Rusty dodged, fast and precise, trained instincts igniting. He lunged again, sending the pitchfork clattering across the floor. Mira crawled backward, heartbeat thundering. The man staggered to his feet, chest heaving, eyes wild beneath a layer of grime and a beard grown long and uneven. His clothes were patched, torn, and stained with earth. He didn't look like someone passing through. He looked like someone who hadn't seen daylight in a very long time. He pointed at Mira, voice ragged. "You stayed out of the tunnels. You had no right. None." Rusty stepped between them, muscles taut, ready to strike again. Mira raised her hands slowly. "I don't want to hurt you," she said. We thought someone needed help." "Help," the man muttered, almost laughing. "No one in this valley helps Callahans." The name broke through Mira's fear like a cold blade. Callahan. From the journals, from the letter, from the whispered warnings. She steadied her breath. "Who are you?" The man froze, like her words had pierced something held together only by will. "My name is Eli." His voice cracked on the sound of it. "Eli Callahan." Silence swept through the barn. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. "But you disappeared 40 years ago," Mira whispered. "Everyone thinks dead is cleaner than the truth," he said bitterly. "Especially Sheriff Briggs." Rusty's ears pricked. Something in the man's scent must have shifted, because Rusty stepped closer, sniffing the ground near Eli's boot. Then he found something half buried in the hay, a small metal object. Rusty pawed it free. A tarnished medal glinted in the moonlight. The man stared at it, breath stopped in his chest, a lifetime collapsing into a single moment. He reached for it with shaking hands, wiping dirt off the engraved initials, EC. His voice gave out. Mira saw him break. Not violently, but quietly, like a man who had carried too much for too long. He slumped to his knees. Rusty, sensing the shift from threat to grief, approached and pressed his head gently against Eli's arm. The man let out a strangled sound, half sob, half exhale, and rested his forehead against Rusty's fur. "She's alive," he whispered. "I know she is." Mira knelt beside him. "Your sister, Lila." Eli nodded, eyes red. "She was only 8. The tunnel was ours. We dug it to escape our father's temper. The night it collapsed." He swallowed hard. "Only one of us made it out. Everyone else died. Sheriff Briggs told the town he sealed it for safety, but it wasn't safety he wanted." Mira's throat tightened. "What did he do?" Eli looked toward the farmhouse, toward the valley that had swallowed his whole life. "He poured concrete over the entrance before they finished pulling bodies out. He didn't want an investigation, didn't want the blame. My mother screamed until her voice broke. My father's body was still inside." Mira felt cold all over. "So you hid?" "I stayed under," Eli said, "for years, searching for Lila, listening for her. Every day I thought I heard her." He pressed the medal against his chest, until the sound stopped. Mira's breath trembled. "The chamber under the farm. She lived in it." Eli closed his eyes, pain twisting through him. "She was alive for years, alone, waiting for help that never came because Briggs made sure no one would ever dig again." A board above them groaned. Rusty spun toward the barn doors, growling low. Mira stiffened. "Someone else was in the woods earlier," she whispered. Eli's face hardened. "Briggs knows you found the tunnels." Another thud echoed from the far end of the barn, heavy, intentional. Rusty positioned himself in front of both Mira and Eli, tail straight, stance rigid with determination. Mira took a slow breath, heart rattling in her chest. "So what do we do now?" she whispered. Eli looked at her, something fierce and steady igniting in his eyes for the first time. "We finish what they started," he said. "We bring the truth back to the surface." Another thud, closer this time. Rusty barked once, sharp as a warning flare. The past was clawing its way out of the dark, and the present was coming for them fast. The storm rolled into Red Hollow like a living thing, dragging sheets of rain across the valley and pounding the ground with fists of water. The sky flashed white every few seconds, illuminating the farmhouse, the barn, and the fields that had held so many secrets. The wind screamed across the broken fences, bending the grass flat. Inside the house, Mira held the phone with both hands, her voice steady only because she refused to let herself fall apart. She explained the tunnels, the hidden bunker, the letter about the Callahans, Briggs's involvement. The dispatcher on the other end grew very quiet, then said she was transferring Mira to the Montana Bureau of Investigation. Within 30 minutes, state units were already on the move. But Briggs moved faster. By the time the first unmarked SUV reached the edges of Red Hollow, the sheriff's cruiser was nowhere in sight. His home stood empty, his office abandoned. The storage unit where he kept old permit documents was burning in a controlled, intentional fire. He was erasing everything. Back at the farmhouse, Eli paced with a nervous energy Mira had never seen in him. His hands shook. His breaths came quick and shallow. Rusty sat between Mira and the door, vigilant as ever, body tight as a drawn bowstring. "He's going to kill me before they catch him," Eli muttered. "He always said the past should stay buried." "He's scared," Mira said. "He should be." Eli turned toward her, his eyes haunted yet determined. "We need to find her before he gets to the back tunnel. If he seals it again, she won't survive another collapse." Mira nodded. "We will. Rusty knows the scent." Rusty looked up at the sound of his name. The moment she clipped the search harness onto him, something changed in him. His posture, his breathing, his focus. His training came alive. He lowered his nose to the air, sorted through the scent layers, then let out a sharp bark. He had a trail. The storm battered them as they followed Rusty across the fields. Flashlights struggled against the rain. Mud sucked at their boots, and the wind shoved them sideways. But Rusty was relentless. Every few seconds he paused, adjusted, and pressed forward with renewed certainty. They reached the mouth of the original tunnel near the ridge, half collapsed, wrapped in brush and rotted timber. Eli froze, staring at it like it was both a grave and a doorway. "She was here," he whispered. "When we were kids, this was where she would hide after Father got angry." Rusty barked again and pawed at a narrow crack between the rocks. There, the scent trail. A team of state rescuers arrived moments later, hauling gear, radios, stretchers, reinforced shovels, hydraulic spreaders. Their leader, Officer Jenna Clark, strode through the storm with authority, immediately assessing the stability of the surrounding ground. "It's dangerous," she said. "This whole ridge could come down, but your dog says someone is alive in there?" Mira nodded. "He's never wrong." Jenna looked at Rusty. For a moment, it was as if the entire operation paused, waiting for the call of a single dog. Rusty inhaled again, then barked once. Clear, certain. A location. A life. Jenna pointed at her team. "We dig." The storm made everything harder. Lightning cracked overhead. The ground shifted with every shovel strike. Once, the earth rumbled so violently that the rescuers dove back, expecting the ridge to collapse. But it held. Barely. Rusty stayed at the front, nose close, tail rigid, guiding them inch by inch towards the surviving chamber. Eli kept whispering under his breath. Prayers, memories, names only a brother would know. It took an hour to clear the first reinforced plank. Another 30. Minutes to widen the opening enough for a person to fit. Mira insisted she go first. The rescuers objected. Eli protested. But Rusty pressed against her side, insisting in his own way. So she clipped her light to her jacket and crawled in. The tunnel was narrow, forcing her elbows tight against her ribs. The air was cold, stale, barely breathable. Water dripped from above. The storm outside shook the earth, sending tremors through the beams. Mira pushed deeper until she reached a chamber. Her flashlight beam swept across a small space, much like the one they had seen earlier, but older, rougher, untouched for decades. Pots, blankets, bones of small animals, everything coated in dust. Then she saw movement. A figure curled in the far corner. Mira crawled closer until the flashlight illuminated a woman. Frail, thin, hair white from age or fear, face half hidden behind her hands. Her eyes squeezed shut, recoiling from the light. Mira's chest tightened. "Lila," she whispered, voice trembling. "You're safe now." The woman flinched at the sound of her name. Rusty crawled in behind Mira, belly low, moving slow, as if sensing he was entering a sacred place. He approached the woman with gentle caution, sniffing the air near her hands. Then he licked her fingertips once. Lila's breath hitched. She opened her eyes. They were blue, clouded but alive. "Dog," she whispered, voice like dry leaves. "A good dog." "Yes," Mira said, tears burning her eyes. "He's here to guide you out." When Mira reached for her hand, Lila didn't pull away. Outside, the ridge groaned dangerously, and someone shouted for them to hurry. Rusty turned toward the exit and barked twice, urgent, commanding. They had seconds. Mira wrapped Lila's arm over her shoulder. The woman was shockingly light, like a child made of air and bone. They crawled together through the narrow passage. Rusty guided them, pushing against Lila when she faltered, nudging Mira when she slowed. The moment they reached the opening, the rescuers rushed forward. Eli's voice cut through the storm. "Lila." Her head lifted, and for the first time in 40 years, brother and sister saw each other again. Eli broke. Completely. He fell to his knees, arms open, weeping in a way that carved itself into the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. Lila reached for him, her thin fingers trembling as they touched his face. "You came back," she whispered. "I never stopped looking." He choked. Rusty stood between them, steady and proud, as if guarding a reunion stolen by time itself. The rescuers pulled the siblings and Mira away from the collapsing ridge just as the ground gave out behind them. The tunnel caved in completely, sealing itself for the final time. And the storm softened, almost as if it had been waiting for the truth to be freed. Morning broke over Red Hollow with a pale, cautious light, as though the valley itself was unsure whether it had permission to breathe. Again, the storm had ripped branches from trees, churned the fields into thick mud, and left the old Callahan farmhouse looking like a survivor pulled from the edge of ruin. And yet, there was a strange calm in the air, a sense that something heavy had finally lifted. Lila Callahan lay in a heated rescue tent set up behind the farmhouse. Medical crews moved around her quietly, checking vitals, warming her thin body with blankets, speaking to her in slow, gentle tones. She blinked at the machines beside her, small green lights blinking in steady patterns, a plastic tube delivering warm water to her lips. She looked frightened but awake in a world she had not seen since she was 18. Eli stood just outside the tent flap, one hand gripping the frame so tightly his knuckles whitened. He was still soaked from the storm, dirt staining his shirt and arms. No one asked him to clean up. No one dared. "They said she's stable," Mira said beside him. "Weak, but stable." He nodded without looking at her. "She keeps asking if the sun is real." Mira swallowed the knot in her throat. "It's real. It feels like a dream," Eli whispered. 40 years, I thought she was gone." Rusty sat between them, bandaged along his flank where he had scraped himself against rock during the crawl-out. His tail thumped once against the ground when Mira touched his head. He stayed pressed against Eli's boots, as if he understood that the man needed something solid beneath him. Half an hour later, 2 unmarked state vehicles rolled up the dirt road. Sheriff Briggs was in the back seat of one of them, wrists cuffed, face twisted in something between fury and denial. He kept jerking at the window, shouting at the agents outside. "You don't know what you're talking about." He barked. "The Callahans were unstable, dangerous. This was for the town's safety." No one listened. When agents walked him past Lila's tent, his face drained. She watched him through the flap, her expression shaking, not with fear, but with recognition. She whispered his name. Briggs looked away. Eli stepped forward. If the agents hadn't been between them, he might have lunged. "You left her in there," Eli said, voice low but shaking with contained rage. "You told the town the tunnel collapsed clean. You told them my sister died. You poured concrete over our father's body." Briggs refused to meet his eyes. The agents pulled him along the path toward the car. "You buried the truth," Eli called after him. "But she lived anyway." Rusty let out a deep, low bark, as if punctuating the words, as if letting Briggs know that this valley no longer belonged to his lies. The sheriff flinched, then was shoved into the cruiser. The car rolled down the dirt road, disappearing beyond the trees. A mix of townspeople gathered by the fence line, staring with wide eyes. Some whispered. Some cried. Some held hats against their chests. One old woman stepped forward. "Eli, I'm so sorry. We didn't know." Eli didn't answer. He stared after the departing vehicle, breathing hard, anchored only by Rusty nudging his knee. Later that afternoon, Mira sat beside Lila's cot in the tent. The woman trembled every time a sound startled her, a zipper, a cough, the distant rumble of a generator. Her eyes darted around, absorbing everything at once. The modern world was too bright, too loud, too fast. Mira spoke softly. "You're safe now. It's okay to rest." Lila studied her face, almost as if trying to decode it. "You found me." Mira shook her head. "Rusty found you." Lila turned toward the dog lying near the tent entrance. Rusty lifted his head, tail wagging slowly. Lila smiled. Small, fragile, but real. She whispered, "Good dog." Mira blinked back warmth behind her eyes. That evening, the clouds finally broke. A warm light spilled across the valley, painting the fields gold. Medical crews had left, promising to return in the morning. Townspeople had gone home, leaving casseroles, blankets, and boxes of clothes on the farmhouse porch. Mira sat on the back steps, legs pulled close, watching the quiet world knit itself back together. Rusty rested beside her, head in her lap. His bandage had begun to loosen. She tied it again gently. "You scared the life out of me back there," she murmured. "But of course you knew what you were doing." He pressed his head into her hand, eyes soft, tail tapping twice against the step as if saying he'd do it all again. Eli emerged from the tent and stood beside them, hands in his pockets. He watched the fading light, his shoulders lowering for the first time since she'd met him. "Mira," he said quietly, "I owe you everything." She shook her head. "You owe Rusty. I just followed him." Eli laughed softly, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. "Maybe so, but no one else would have listened to a man who lived underground." His voice thickened. "You listened." She didn't know how to answer that, so she didn't. Instead, she looked out at Red Hollow, its fields washed clean by the storm. The valley no longer felt cursed. It felt like a place breathing again. Rusty lifted himself to his feet, sniffed the air, then trotted a few steps forward as if sensing something shifting in the wind, a beginning instead of an ending. Mira followed his gaze. For the first time since she arrived, she felt something she hadn't known in years. Home. A soft warmth spread through her chest as she watched Rusty turn back to them, tail wagging, ready for whatever came next. No more running. No more hiding. The storm was over. Healing had finally begun. Spring seeped slowly into Red Hollow, thawing the frozen soil and pushing green shoots through the mud. The valley softened under its touch. Snow melted off roofs. Birds returned. And for the first time in decades, the old Callahan farm didn't feel like a place people avoided. It felt like a place waking up. Mira wiped sweat from her brow as she stood beside the rebuilt fence line. Eli hammered the last post into place, while Lila rested on a nearby bench, wrapped in a wool shawl, watching them with quiet pride. Rusty trotted around their feet, inspecting their work as though he were a foreman overseeing the entire project. Everything they rebuilt together. Eli had insisted on keeping the old structures, repairing rather than replacing them. "If something survived the storm," he'd said, "it deserves a second life." The barn now stood tall again with fresh timber. The farmhouse had new windows and a patched roof, and next to the orchard, a fenced field had been cleared and replanted with wildflowers for the animals they hoped to shelter. It was Rusty's domain. He roamed it daily, nose down, tail up, ensuring every inch was safe. Yet beneath the rebuilding, something else tugged at Mira's thoughts, something she hadn't shared yet. It started when she'd gone through the county's adoption records. A stack of old files had been sent to the farm by the state investigators, items recovered from Briggs's destroyed office. Paperwork scorched at the edges, some pages brittle with age. One file bore her birth year, her birth county, her original name. She had carried it in her jacket pocket for a week. Her fingers kept drifting to it even while she worked the fields or painted the porch. She tried to ignore it, to convince herself it didn't change anything. But it changed everything. This afternoon, with the sun warm on her shoulders and the scent of fresh grass in the air, she knew she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. She walked toward the bench where Lila sat. Rusty followed close, sensing the shift in her mood. When Mira reached the bench, he pressed against her leg for encouragement. Lila looked up, her smile soft, her eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. Life was returning to her slowly, like light creeping into an abandoned room. "You've been quiet today," Lila said. Mira sat beside her. The file trembled slightly in her hands. "I found something." Eli, hearing her tone, set the hammer aside and joined them. Mira unfolded the paperwork. "My adoption records," she said. "There were fragments of a letter from the woman who gave birth to me." She took a breath. "Her name was Anna Mae Callahan." Lila's entire body stilled. Eli's eyes widened. "That was our mother's sister." Mira nodded, voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "I didn't know. She died when I was a year old. She listed her sister as next of kin. Said she hoped I'd end up somewhere safe. Briggs handled the paperwork. He sealed most of it." Lila's lip quivered. Her hand floated up toward Mira's face as though she were afraid to touch something so fragile. "Anna Mae sent you away because the valley was dangerous." Tears filled her eyes. "You were ours. All this time, you were ours." Mira leaned into her touch. Her voice broke. "I thought I didn't have a family." Now Lila was openly crying, her shoulders shaking. "You came home. After everything, you came back to us." Eli's breath hitched. He wiped his eyes quickly, then gave up trying to hide it. He pulled Mira into their first true embrace, Lila joining him. Rusty pressed himself against all three of them, tail sweeping the ground, head lifted proudly. Family restored, not by blood alone, but by survival, by courage, by the simple refusal to abandon one another again. When they finally pulled apart, Lila whispered, "Your mother would have loved you. She would have loved that you are brave. And that you came here before knowing the truth," Eli added, voice warm with emotion. "Maybe the valley called you home." Mira looked around at the fields, the new fences, the barn rebuilt with careful hands, the mountains darkening in the late light. For the first time in her life, she felt rooted to a place. Not because she belonged nowhere, but because she belonged here. The days that followed were filled with work, laughter, and beginnings. Eli started a small workshop, restoring old tools. Lila, growing stronger, tended a small herb garden outside the house, her fingers moving through the soil with surprising confidence. Mira handled the farm operations with a steadiness she didn't know she had. But Rusty became the heart of it. Word spread across town about the dog who found people, who wouldn't let the truth stay buried. Families began bringing animals they found abandoned on the roadside or injured after storms. Children came to visit the farm, timid at first, then running across the fields with Rusty trotting contentedly behind them. One child asked, "Is he a hero dog?" Mira replied, watching Rusty nudge the child's hand gently. "He's more than that. He's hope." Soon they gave the place a name, the Red Hollow Healing Farm, a sanctuary for lost animals, a haven for kids who needed a place to feel safe, a home for those who had survived what should have broken them. The town embraced it more warmly than Mira had imagined. Volunteers came from nearby ranches, a carpenter donated lumber, an animal clinic offered free vet services. And every night, as the valley glowed orange under the sunset, Mira felt the weight of what they were building. Legacy wasn't what people left behind. Legacy was what they saved. One evening, Mira stood at the edge of the wildflower field, watching Rusty guide a boy through training drills, slow steps, gentle commands, the boy laughing every time Rusty performed a perfect sit or down. Eli and Lila sat on the porch, watching too, wrapped in quilts despite the warm air. Mira felt a quiet swell of emotion she couldn't name. Home, family, purpose, all the things she had once believed were lost forever. Rusty saw her across the field and ran toward her, bounding through the flowers, ears flying back. He skidded to a stop at her feet, tail wagging hard enough to shake his whole body. She knelt and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. "You didn't just save them," she whispered. "You saved me too." Rusty leaned against her with the full weight of trust and belonging. The valley had finally learned how to breathe again. And so had she. The valley shone in a warm October gold as the crowd gathered in front of the barn, now painted a deep red that matched the spirit of the place. Children sat on the fence rails, legs swinging. Volunteers arranged folding chairs across the field. A banner stretched across the porch of the farmhouse, Red Hollow Sanctuary Opening Day. Mira stood near the front steps, smoothing the edges of her shirt, trying to settle the tremor running through her hands. She had spoken to groups before, but never like this. Never as someone with a home, never as someone with a family. Rusty lay at her feet, head held high, chest rising in calm, steady breaths. He wore no vest today, no harness, just a simple collar with his name carved into the leather. He didn't need anything else. Everyone here knew exactly who he was. He looked up at her, and she felt her heart beat slow. "You ready?" she whispered. Rusty blinked once, slow and sure. Eli helped Lila to a chair near the front. Layla waved at Mira with a smile that reached her eyes, something Mira had waited months to see. Eli stood behind her, hands resting lightly on the back of her chair, the weight of ancestral guilt and decades of survival lifted from his shoulders. The event began with murmurs, applause, a song played by a local guitarist. Then a woman from the State Rescue Board stepped forward and introduced Mira as the founder of the sanctuary. The crowd clapped, louder this time. A few whistles, a flash from a camera. Mira walked to the microphone, Rusty close beside her. She wasn't sure how to begin. The wind answered for her. A soft, rolling breeze came down from the ridge, stirring the wildflowers and rustling the trees at the edge of the property. It brushed against her jacket, familiar, almost guiding. She took a breath and spoke. Red Hollow has carried a lot of pain for a long time, she said. Some of it was buried, some of it was ignored, some of it was simply lost. But today, we get to choose something different. She looked at Lila, at Eli, then at Rusty. We choose healing. Applause spread through the crowd. Mira continued. This sanctuary isn't just for animals, it's for people who need a place to breathe, a place to feel safe, a place to start over. I know about starting over. I know about feeling like you belong nowhere. Her voice wavered, the truth touching the rawest places inside her. And I know what it means to be saved when you least expect it. A reporter from Billings raised her hand. Mira, something people keep asking online. Why did you keep Rusty with you through everything? Why didn't you try to find him a home sooner? Most folks would think a homeless woman couldn't take care of a working dog. The crowd quieted. Cameras pointed at her. Mira slowly knelt beside Rusty, her hand resting on his neck. Rusty leaned into her touch, his loyalty written in the way his eyes softened. Her voice dropped to something intimate but steady. He didn't save my farm. A pause. The wind held still. He saved the woman I was losing. A hush fell over the field. Even the children on the fence stopped swinging their legs. Mira lifted her chin and looked into the nearest camera lens, the one pointed at her by a local news team, the one that would be clipped and shared across the state by morning. What's your story with a loyal pet? She asked softly. Because every person I meet seems to have one. We just forget to tell them sometimes. The valley wind rose again, sweeping across the fields like a blessing. It carried the smell of pine and warm soil. It carried something else, too, something lighter, almost like the echo of laughter long gone. Mira looked toward the ridge and felt, for the first time, gratitude rather than grief. Lila followed her gaze, whispering something under her breath. Eli closed his eyes as if listening to familiar voices. The Callahans had been shattered once, but the valley was returning them piece by piece. Rusty nudged Mira's hand, reminding her the moment was still happening, still real. A volunteer stepped onto the porch, releasing the first group of rescue pups into the field. A ripple of cheers erupted as they tumbled into the grass. Rusty trotted forward to greet them, sniffing each one, guiding them gently away from the crowd like a patient, seasoned shepherd. He thinks they're his trainees, Eli said with a laugh. He's not wrong, Mira replied. Cameras filmed Rusty as children ran beside him, laughing. He moved with quiet confidence, a hero unaware of his own legend. Mira stepped closer to the microphone one last time. Thank you for being here, she said. If this sanctuary means something to you, share it. Support rescue work, support healing, and if you want more stories like ours, follow the journey on the German Shepherd channel. Rusty will appreciate the company. The audience applauded again. Bigger, louder, warmer. Rusty turned toward the sound, tail wagging like he understood every word. Above them, the sky stretched wide and blue, finally free of storms. Mira stood in the center of the valley, her dog at her side, her family behind her, and her future opening like a long, open field. Healing wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something worth sharing.